Welcome to our first episode of FNL Fridays. I am Teresa, your host, and today I am here with Julia Balto, and she is a mental health and transformational coach. Hi, Julia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you. So as you know, the FNL brand is all about fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle, and I thought that you would be the perfect person to have on first because you are a transformation coach and you help people design their vision and create the lives that they want. And with any goals in fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle, I think it's really important to start with a clear idea of where we want to go. So I thought you would be the perfect person to start with. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you got into this career, and how you help people?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to talk about this because I agree. The vision is where we start. And I'm a women's mental health and transformational coach. So I work with women to help them get out of their heads and really take control of feelings of stress and depression and anxiety. And a lot of those fears and limiting beliefs that we're holding on to. So to really start to make friends with our feelings, to learn to use them as our superpowers so that we can take control of our habits and ultimately take control of our lives so that women can step into lives of purpose and passion and joy in whatever it is that they're doing, not feeling held back by their bodies and mentally and emotionally. Yeah. So that's the work that I do. I love it. I think it's pretty important.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I'm excited about.
Yeah. And you and I, we're good friends, and obviously we know what each other are about, but our viewers might not know. So I'm super excited that now they know who you are and can see why I chose you to be on here, because you and I are so about empowering women, helping them feel better. My side might be a little bit more on the physical side of things, and yours is a little bit more on the mental health side of things. But as we know, those two things go hand in hand, super important. So I want to talk about creating a vision for our lives, because like I mentioned before, if we have any goals that we're setting out to accomplish, I think it's really important to be clear on those. And you have helped me personally with this, and you're really damn good at it. So why don't you tell our viewers what a vision is to start with?
So starting with, we've all heard this idea, I think, that we should create a vision. So what actually is a vision? A vision in its simplest form is articulating where you want to be. So you'll see businesses will do this a lot, actually. So a business will have a vision that says 6 months out or a year out, or just their long-term vision is that when they're showing up in the world and doing their business, this is what the world looks like. This is how they fit into it. And so we get that concept in business, right? We say that makes sense. You'll probably see that a lot of people in corporate workplaces or hospitals have them. We need the same thing for our personal life. So a vision is a really compelling, emotionally invigorating statement that articulates who you are when you're showing up as your healthiest, highest, happiest self, who that person is. And it's different from maybe a set of goals of like, I want to have this, or I want to be at this point in my life, in the sense that when I'm working with my clients, we're really working to tap into who are you and what are you doing? So how are you showing up? How are you feeling? How are you talking to yourself? What are you wearing? What are you doing with your free time? It's much more in depth, and I would say soul-centered, or emotionally connected than I drive this car and I've gotten this promotion and I do X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like, I'm sure a lot of people have heard this before. You have to find your why, right? Although I would say a vision is a little bit deeper than that, because like you said, it's a lot of internal reflection and getting down into the nitty gritty. At least for myself, I know that when I set my vision, I have to cut through my bullshit and not be afraid to be honest with myself, which I think is one of the biggest hangups that people run into. So would you agree that when you're setting your vision, you have to be super honest with yourself and not allow yourself to lie to yourself? Or
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So when I like to think of the vision as actually, it's not this person that we're becoming. It's not a thing that we're working to achieve. It's who that best version of yourself is inside that we're working to unleash. So it's not like when I'm a new person, when I feel like I show up this way, this is really getting clear on at your core who you are. That like highest, healthiest, happiest, best version of yourself. And so when we do that, it's not necessarily a matter of just sitting down and saying, okay, like for 10 minutes, I'm going to write out my vision. We can start there, and that's a really powerful place. But this vision, it's almost like this like moving, breathing, changing thing, and it should shift with time. The more time that we spend in self-reflection and getting to know ourselves and personal development and weeding through the lies and the fears and the limiting beliefs that we have, that more authentic version of our vision starts to come out. So that's part of why it's so important. It is the why, and it's also forcing us to get clear on who exactly we are, what it is we really want. So I think most people, when my first vision that I created was probably like, it was just what I'd seen on TV or what I'd seen from other people. So I had a picture of like a nice car, and I was thinking that I would have like this much money, and it was just very generic. It was what I thought my vision should be. And so the more work that we start to do, the more time that we spend cutting through the layers of shoulds of like, yeah, well, like that is what I want, but I could never get that. So instead I'm going to say that this is what I want. The more that we work through that and really spend time reflecting and getting to know ourselves and learning to trust that, and then also being brave enough to articulate that, the clearer the vision becomes.
Right. And I love that you said that it's something that changes over time, or that it can, and I know, again, from my experience, when you and I the first time we worked together, I don't know, 3 years ago at this point, and I set this vision for myself, my vision now is different. It's not completely different. I still am, my core beliefs and values are still the same, but as I've done a lot of inner work and growth, and I've realized what really was important to me by trying to work through it and what wasn't important to me, there's certain things that I've kind of let go of, or I've shifted what they look like. So I think that's a really important thing to remind people, is it's like you're not locked into this one thing you say. And if you're not sure, that's okay, but you have to start working through it. And I think you gain a lot of clarity from actually just taking action, which we all kind of know hopefully we know that.
But exactly. I mean, I think it's what you said of, it's not permanent. It's not necessarily the future, this all defining thing. Like once you set this is the course of your life, but we have to start somewhere. And it's in declaring whatever it is true for you right now, what you're craving right now, what feels right to you right now. That's how you start to even take action to explore that, to get clear on your desires, to see what may be holding you back, so that it influences that future vision, which gets bigger and deeper and more authentic to who you are.
Right. So why don't we start? I want this to be simple for people who haven't done this before, and kind of just starting with the basics, because I know this can feel like a very heavy loaded thing when someone's like, tell me who you are. So why don't you give maybe your top tips, or how you normally do it with a client who is just getting started with setting a vision, or hasn't even heard of it, doesn't even know what it is. Kind of walk us through where you might tell them to start, maybe specific steps or tips that they could use to start clarifying their vision.
Absolutely. So when we think about breaking down, creating a vision into steps, there's several different routes that we can take with this. And I think the first and most important distinction to make is that this vision, it's supposed to be empowering. It's supposed to be something that we are excited about, that when you read it or you say that, you're like, right, this is who I am. This is the person that I'm working on unleashing. So because it is something that is really empowering and inspiring, it cannot be created from a place of lack and berating ourselves. What we tend to do is start from the space of saying like, well, I need to lose weight, and I need to start working out more, and I should be more productive, and I'm not as far along in my career as I think I should be, whatever your goals are. We do this the same thing if we have a business vision, right? It's not big enough yet, and I haven't put in enough work yet. And we start from a place of lack. Right. So when we're creating a vision, that's not the space that we want to create that out of, because then our vision is just going to be like, well, I'm less fat, and I don't hate my body so much, and I maybe like think nicer thoughts, right? That's not very empowering or inspiring, and a reflection of who that highest self is. So instead, I like to start by spending time intentionally focusing on what some of your strengths are. And this can be really challenging for a lot of us to sit there and declare what it is we know that we're actually good at, diving into what some of your values are, reflecting on some of your past successes and what you did to make those happen.
Can I jump in really quick?
Mm.
So a question about that. If you are struggling, right? Like you said, sometimes it's kind of hard and we don't know, like, what are we good at? Or if we have low self-esteem, it can feel like nothing, we're not good at anything. Would you recommend bringing someone else in, or friends or family, and asking them for what they think of you?
I absolutely do. And so this is why sometimes it's helpful when we work through this with a coach or someone else, because they can be that sounding board. Even we'll say, well, like, I kind of think that I'm good at this and I'm okay at this. And having someone else just be able to reflect that back to you and say, like, what I've heard is that you work really hard and that you are resilient and you're persistent. So having someone reflect that back to you is powerful. Yeah. And if you are struggling with that, we can phrase this in a couple of different ways. We can even say, what would your best friend say about you? What would your parents, like, what would your partner, what would they say are some of your strengths? And then we can take that to the next level and go ask those people. This can be having a conversation. This can be writing an email or a letter and say, I'm starting to do some self-work. What would you say are some of my strengths? What would you say are things that when you think of me are uniquely me, that you like, not that necessarily you like about me, but you see as a strength that I have. You see it's something that I'm good at. And asking for that feedback can be a really powerful first step to help you start to recognize it. It's never the same. People can say tons of nice things about us and we don't necessarily believe that, but it is a start. To have that reflected to you by somebody else is a really great way to start to draw some of that out and own it. Another really powerful thing that I think can be helpful is taking quizzes, whether they're not necessarily quizzes, but personality assessments, values assessments. There's tons of strength finding assessments online. Again, this is external. It's somebody else giving you a little bit of validation. So you're going to know whether or not that resonates, but it's helpful in the beginning when this feels like a foreign process to have that validated and to say, I do think I'm really good at problem solving. And to hear that reflected in this quiz helps me to own that. It helps me to recognize that, that is something that I do better than other people might.
Okay. So starting with strengths ultimately, and maybe our positive, or what we see as positive personality traits, would probably be like the first simplest step to this.
Absolutely. And this is a process that can actually take a couple weeks, a couple days, a couple minutes. It really depends on how you want to sit with this, but starting to establish the practice that says, I'm intentionally focusing my thoughts on what I do well, on what is awesome about me, about what is going well in my life and what I've done to create that. So that we get to say, okay, given that I do have these good things, like that I have done this, that I do have these strengths, what's really important to me in my life right now? What am I feeling a need to shift or change? What am I desiring? And allowing yourself to sit with that question and honestly answer it out of the space that's assuming that, like, you're not broken, you're not needing to be fixed, you're actually pretty great and working to make your life a little bit better.
So those are areas where we say, okay, we have our strengths and what we're good at and what we love, but then areas where we feel like, I want to improve, I want to uplift here, I want to gain this or become better. So that's the second part of it.
Yes. So we're also not pretending that we live in a perfect world and everything's magical. Like, it is okay to declare that, this is going really well. Like, I've worked really hard in my career and I own that I've gotten my education and I've moved myself forward and I've really worked to create healthy relationships. And now I'm really wanting a healthier relationship with my body. I'm wanting to feel a little bit different there. I'm wanting to feel confident in who I am as a person. You get to say that that's a desire that you have, without necessarily spinning it with saying, and I hate myself and I need to, like, I'm just so bad. I talk to myself so awfully. Does that difference?
Yeah. And it's actually, so I have the FNL Journal, which you know of, and there's a bunch of women that are using it and they're in a private Facebook community. And one of the women just recently shared that she told me she didn't want to put anything negative in her journal because she wanted it to be a place of positivity. And I said, so she's kind of putting a positive spin on the negative things. And I told her I do think it's important to address those negative feelings and know that they're there and not just put a wall up. I also appreciated that she was trying to kind of put that positive spin. So instead of, don't be sad all the time about this relationship. Instead, it's, build up relationships that make me feel really great. So she knows it's still there, but it's focusing more towards growing towards the positive, even though we are still addressing that there are negative things and there are things that we're struggling with.
And that, I think, is actually at the core of this whole idea of building a vision. We're not saying that we're perfect human beings. We're not saying that we're broken human beings. We're saying,
Right.
like, this is who I am, and I'm accepting myself as I am right now. And I'm working to up-level things a little bit. I'm working to peel back some of those layers and unleash an even higher version of myself. So it's intentionally focusing our thoughts and our language and our actions on moving towards the positive.
Right. So after we have those two things done, and again, I mean, I'm sure this is different for everybody, and that could just be it. That could be just where you start. But after go ahead.
Sorry. So spend time, really clarifying, like, intentional self-love, honoring who you are and what you've accomplished and what your strengths are. Calling in what it is you are wanting to be different in your life, acknowledging that this is an area that you're wanting to grow in. From this space, painting a picture. So in crystal clear detail, as many adjectives as you can put in, as much detail as we can add, what it looks like. And what I think is helpful is to give this a time frame. So to break this down, instead of saying, like, my future self 60 years from now, say 6 months from now, 6 months from now, when I'm showing up as the healthiest, happiest, best version of myself, what am I doing? How do I stand? How do I talk to myself? What do I wear? How do I spend my free time? What does my relationship with food look like? How am I eating? What am I eating? What am I thinking about when I'm eating? How am I moving my body? What does that feel like? So painting a picture of what that healthiest, highest, happiest version of you looks like in as much detail as possible. And so this can look like I wake up in the morning feeling energized and refreshed, and I get out of bed and I pour myself a cup of lemon water. Like, if you want to create that much detail, the more details you can infuse into that, the more real it makes it for you.
Right. So you mentioned, while you were speaking, you mentioned 6 months. And I'm just curious, do you think that 6 months is actually maybe the optimal time to set for ourselves for a vision? Or do you think it's something shorter, something farther out? What's your opinion on that?
I think there's room for both. I think it's really helpful to have like a longer term vision of, like, I don't like putting it of like 10 or 5 or 2 years, something that feels like it's enough space for you to work in. But then we also want to dial that back into something that's like, okay, so 6 months, why I like 6 months is that 6 months, I've got 6 months to do some serious work, to grow, to show up, to shift the way that I'm thinking, but it's also not so far away that it's like never going to happen. So this, you kind of have to sit with it and see what feels right for you. I think especially when we're like, where do I start? 6 months is helpful because it's not this big question of, who do I want to be 5 years from now? And maybe you're like, I don't know who I want to be tomorrow. So starting with 6 months can be it's helpful because it's a little bit more grounding, right? If it's May and we're like, okay, 6 months out from now, that's this year still. That's still 2019. Okay, how do I want to be showing up? Who is the person that I want to be? I think it can help to bring us back into reality, but also give us enough space to say, like, I have time to step into this. It's not immediate. I'm not expecting myself to be a different person tomorrow.
Right. And I actually designed, again, as you know, I designed the FNL Journal as a 6 month journal because that's exactly how I felt. I felt like 3 months, especially as an adult, 3 months like flies by. Like, it just disappears when we're working. A lot of us have families, we have pets, we have a significant other, we've got a social life, it can fly by. So I figured, okay, 3 months, not that there's anything wrong. Like, you can get a lot done in 3 months, but sometimes that feels like a lot of us are already booked out for the next month or two. So it's like, oh crap, like, I don't have time to set this vision. Like, so that's what I did with the journal. It's 6 months, but then from there it's broken down into a 3 month goal. Exactly. And then that's further broken down every month and week. So kind of moving on to that area of designing a vision, do you think it's super important to like reverse engineer, or how do you say you set your 6 month vision? Then what? Like, where do you start? Now that you've got it all written out and you've got this clear idea, then what's the first step to actually implementing?
So yes, we have to reverse engineer the vision. So, and actually before I answer that, I want to make a point to say this vision that we've created. So this is this statement, this is us owning who that highest version of ourselves is and the person that we're working to step into. It's extremely powerful if we do something with it. To just spend the time, and even if you spend a week and you're journaling on it and you're thinking about it and you're asking your friends and you complete this really beautiful vision and then you never think about it again, it's not magic. It doesn't create necessarily that much in our life. So It needs to be something that now we're starting to think about, that now we're seeing this vision on a daily basis. We're connecting with the vision, right? You're taking that 30 seconds to start your day. Take a deep breath and like say, yes, this is who I am. This is what I'm working on. And now from there, we do want to start to reverse engineer it. So if we started with something that's 6 months out, 3 months out is a great way to break that down and say, okay, if 6 months out, this is where you want to be. 3 months out from now, I think, and this can be a guess, if I were to have accomplished these things, if I were to be doing these habits regularly, I think that would have me that much closer to that goal. Which means if 3 months out from now, this is where I want to be, then a month out from now, I think this is about where I should be.
Right.
Which means maybe this week, this is what I should start to focus on. What I think is important here is that we do break it down so we start to see what some of those actual steps might look like. If we don't break it down, now the vision can feel overwhelming in the sense of like, well, how do I even start? Where do I accomplish? Like, where would I start to make that happen?
Right.
And this does not have to be reverse engineered in so specific detail that every possible step to get you there is lined up for the next 6 months. Because the beauty in this is we start to take action. So this week you start to do one little thing that's going to move you there. And now you get to evaluate, you get to see what works, you get to see how that feels, and then you get to adjust and keep moving forward. So we want to reverse engineer it and give you a plan to start moving towards that. And then also respect that having the intention of showing up as that vision and exploring what's working for you and what isn't is just as much a part of the process. It is not having the perfect plan.
And I know for me, again, that's so true because, you know, it helps a lot when you have a coach and you have that accountability or you have some sort of accountability. But I mean, you and I both know I would show up. I'm pretty good at staying accountable, but I would also show up in certain things just over and over. I was like, I didn't do it. And then it was like, oh, reflection time. I'm not doing it because I don't actually really care about it. So I'm going to change it or I'm going to remove it. And that's just one example. Or there was something else where I was like, you know what? I thought this would be like the thing to do and I thought this would work and I tried it and it like I didn't get the result I thought. It didn't feel right. And learning that is okay and that there's nothing wrong with saying like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to get rid of that because that wasn't working or it didn't feel right or it just wasn't what I thought. Now, that's not to say giving up on stuff, right? Of like, oh, that was hard. I don't want to work out anymore because it's hard. That's different. But if you know over and over, you're saying you want something, but you're not doing it, or you have an idea and you follow through with it for a good amount of time and it's just not taking where you want, or you're realizing, you know what, actually, it's not what I want. I thought I did, but I don't. And there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, I'm going to change it. It's very flexible. And I think that's sometimes where people get stuck is they feel like this cut and dry, black and white. And I 100% was that person. And you know that. And so many, especially I think women are, where it's like, yes or no, it's black or white. I did it right or I did it wrong. I have to do this or I'm not doing it at all. And it's like that type of thinking got me nowhere fast.
I think that's such an important point because this underlies the entire philosophy of why we're building a vision, right? None of this is about saying, I'm broken, I need to fix myself, I need to do something dramatic and change everything. Mm-hmm. All the entire philosophy of having a vision supposes that you're okay. You're enough exactly the way you are. This is okay. And you're wanting to make some changes. And you're wanting to expand and unleash like a better and happier and brighter version of you. So from that space, which is not concrete, it's not like I've won or I've failed. It's very much this process of growth and expansion. This implies that there's going to be changes along the way. That as you start to take action, that's when we start to bring in some of that clarity around what actually is really important to you and how does that really feel. And yes, like you said, sometimes we're going to struggle, we're going to have hurdles, And that's where enlisting support from a coach, from a friend, from having people to talk it out with, to problem solve, to figure out what is really getting in the way here. That's really important. But that's all a process of refining the vision. So that as you go, the clearer it starts to become. And now we start to get like really excited about it, because this is really a clear representation of who you are and what you're working towards. It is so not about, and this is what I think, like you had said, a lot of us are afraid to articulate what it is we actually want in our vision. We keep that really small and we don't really put out there what it is, because we assume that means that now we have to do it perfectly. And if we don't, we fail. And instead, this is so much more about saying, okay, if this is who I really see myself showing up as, what is the work that I need to do to get there?
Right.
What kind of support do I need to bring in? How do I need to challenge myself? What do I need to be willing to let go of and say, actually, this isn't what I want, and that's okay.
Right. And I think another, to your point, when we do design our vision, another thing that I struggled with was not getting started because of the fear or the expectation of what I thought it was going to take, or what I thought the experience was going to be. And I keep referring back to you and I working together just because that's, you know, where so much of this happened. But I constantly would like set this goal and I would have so much resistance to doing it. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to get started. It's going to take forever. It's overwhelming. Once I start it, I have to finish it, and that's going to take forever. And then almost every single time I would start and I'd be like, okay, I'm really embarrassed because like I started and it took me like 20 minutes, or this thing was like so much less intense than I thought, or you know what I mean? Like we put these ideas of what we think the experience is going to be, or what it's going to take. And then we have this resistance to start, I would say, ultimately out of fear. You know, maybe it's not like, oh, I'm terrified, but it's the fear of, oh, it's going to take work, or, oh, I'm going to have to be honest with myself, or, oh, this is just something sucky that I don't feel like doing, but I know I need to
fail. Like I've failed how many times before?
Right. Yeah, that's a huge one. So reminding ourselves that, and I tell my clients this all the time, it's like, you don't have to finish everything right away. Like you can, even with the journal, right? This journal that I just put out, a lot of the women are like, oh, I haven't started the vision pages, which is the funniest part to me because that's like the most important part. But, you know, they're like, I haven't started the vision because it's just like, it seems like so much work. And I'm like, well, yes, it is, because it's meant to be. That's the deep part of it. But I said, you know, you don't have to sit there for 2 hours and try to like scrub your brain for the answers. Just start letting stuff out. Just tell yourself you'll spend 15 minutes. And I think with setting a vision and all the things that we put on there, that's what we have to remember, is like the little things over time, consistently, over and over, that are refined and reflected on. That's what actually makes a difference. It's not just saying like, I'm gonna go sign up and get my master's degree tomorrow, and I'm gonna change my eating habits this weekend. Like, no, that doesn't work. We all know that. You fall off because it's just way too much, and you set this expectation for yourself. So I'm rambling a lot, but my point being, just chipping away at it, I think, has been the most effective for me. And I'm sure you know this as a coach. I assume you see that all the time, right? It's like there's so much resistance up front because we're afraid of whatever it is of getting started. And then once we start to get started, it's like, oh, that's actually not so bad.
And I think this kind of like perfectly summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about, is declaring our vision, really getting honest with ourselves and saying, this is the woman that I want to show up as. This is who I know myself to be when I'm like fully aligned and grounded and showing up as my healthiest, happiest self. When we declare that, we don't have to know all of the steps to get there. That's okay. Yes, we reverse engineer what we do know, what some ideas are, what we think is going to help to take us there. We get overwhelmed and unmotivated from moving towards that when now we're like, okay, so what are the 90 million things I need to do to accomplish that?
Right.
Okay. We get to make peace with saying we don't need to know all of the steps to get there. Totally fine if we don't. If we can identify one step that we think might start to move you there, now that's when the work comes in. So the work in creating our vision is in being honest with ourselves and articulating who it is we really want to be, reflecting, getting to know ourselves and starting to refine that. The follow-up work is that daily, consistent, small steps. It is not, if your vision is really empowering and this full expression of who you are, it should not be something you can do tomorrow, that we can figure out all of the steps to immediately. Otherwise, like, that's way too small. And now we got to talk about playing a little bit bigger. So it's okay to not know all the steps. All we want to start to focus on is what is one thing that I can start to do today that's going to maybe move me towards that just a little bit more, and explore and come at it with this attitude of really saying, like, it's not about winning or failing. It's not that black or white, like you've achieved it or you haven't. It is so much more exploring and experimenting with what's going to allow you to show up as that highest version of yourself.
Right. I love that. So I want to respect everybody's time. But if someone had questions, or maybe they want to talk to you about coaching, if they've never had a coach before, why don't you tell everyone where they can reach you and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You guys can email me at julia@juliabalto.com. You'll find my site, juliabalto.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, Julia Balto. So if you guys remember my name, you can find me.
And that's Balto.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
So thank you so much for your time. This was just refreshing and got me motivated again to start working on my vision. But I think this is really going to help a lot of, every single person who watches this, because it is just such a helpful topic. And I appreciate your time. And I guess that's it. Thank you for being my first guest on FNL Friday episode 1.
Thank you so much for having me.
So much fun.